The Trump meltdown, Republicans divided. How many Michigan lawmakers are pulling their endorsement? Plus, we take a look at two key issues on the ballot, regional transit and Prop A and B in Detroit, and headlines. Nolan and Stephen are here, so settle in because MiWeek starts right now.
Did you know? Gordon Food Service was started by a 23-year-old entrepreneur as a butter and egg delivery business more than a century ago. In 1948, school teacher Gerard Wendell Hayworth borrowed $10,000 from his parents to start a woodworking operation in his family's garage. It's now Hayworth Incorporated. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Funding is also provided by Delta.
Hi there, and welcome to MiWeek, the only news and political analysis show you have to watch to be smart at your next cocktail party. I'm Christy McDonald. Our contributors Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press and Nolan Finley of the Detroit News are here. And it feels like, we're a broken record, but good grief. The presidential race is taking on another major twist. Republicans are running for cover. WikiLeaks is spilling emails. New polls are out about Michigan. We're going to talk about it all. Also coming up, we're going to take a look at some other issues on the ballot, including regional transit and the Detroit benefits proposals. Plus, will Governor Snyder face a grand jury over legal bills tied to Flint? We've got some headlines to cover there as well. So it is all coming up for you. But let's start with a closer look tonight at what Donald Trump calls his campaign now that he's free of the Republican shackles. Just how many lawmakers won't endorse him now, including our Michigan delegation? And does it really matter at this point? So let's bring in Nolan and Stephen. Guys, we come here every Thursday on MiWeek, and we think, maybe we'll talk about the debate that happens, but the debate seems so long ago compared to the news cycle that's surrounding Donald Trump in this presidential election and the heartburn that I feel about discussing it every single day. What are your thoughts about what's happening this entire week?
Well, I mean, it's as you said, it's hard to keep up with. It's crazy time. It goes back and forth. You can't print a paper fat enough to get it all in. And this has been one of the most remarkable weeks since last Friday that I've ever seen in politics. I mean, you start out with the Donald Trump sex tape and the immediate reaction to that. The Republicans sort of turning their back on him, and then him going to war with his own party. He says, well, I'm going to run on he's a Republican nominee. And he said, I don't need you Republicans. I'm going to run on my own.
I think what's kind of weird, though, is some people are scuttling back. They're like, well, I'm going to pull my endorsement. And then 3 days later, they say, well, I did a pretty good job at the debate. I think I'm back in. And now then the bombshell of being accused of sexual harassment of these women. I mean, Stephen, there are no words at times.
Well, there are. I mean, I think we're seeing a meltdown of a candidate of a major party candidate that we have not seen since 1964, likely, in terms of just how the wheels come off and maybe heads that person for an unprecedented drubbing at the ballot box. I mean, the question by November 8th may be how low can his totals go, and of course, how much does that affect other races around the country? I mean, can you get so few Republicans excited to even come out to vote that that Democrats take over in state legislatures and things like that? I also think that this is an incredible moral test for the Republican Party and its leadership, its elected officials. I mean, this question of, I'm endorsing him. No, I'm not. I'm back in. I'm out. I mean, I think it makes them look, first of all, it makes them look weak. But second of all, I mean, it is a failure of that test. There is no question about this person, what he stands for, what he's saying, what he would do to sort of fundamental values about this country. There shouldn't be a public official in the country who's unclear about, hey, I'm out.
Yeah, but you keep hearing Republicans say, and Nolan, let me ask you for your input on this. You keep hearing them say, well, it's not really about Donald Trump right now. It's about the Republican values, and it's about the Supreme Court, and it's about filling vacancies that are going to be coming up on the Supreme Court in the next 4 years.
I think mostly what you're hearing him say this week is, I'm not going to defend him anymore. I'm not going to campaign for him anymore. But you have a lot of people, particularly these congressional races, and if you look at our poll today, you start to see the impact on Republican congressional candidates and perhaps even state house candidates. They're really between a rock and the hard place. Whichever way they go, it's political suicide. If they say we're not going to vote for Trump, we're not endorsing Trump, and some have. You have this 30-some% of Republican voters, you're going to lose. If you say you're going to lose, the other percentage. These guys are in a real hard place. I haven't seen any congressman in Michigan pull their endorsement. I saw Fred Upton called for him to step off the ticket.
Well, he never endorsed him to begin with.
He never endorsed him to begin with, nor did Governor Snyder, nor did a lot of folks.
But you saw Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley coming out and saying we need to all rally around Trump, and he was the one who openly backed off and said, you know what? No, I'm not endorsing him. I'm not voting for him.
He pulled his endorsement, but he's not up this year. And you got a lot of people who in the Republican Party who understand Trump's going to lose and is going to lose by epic numbers, and they're trying to hold on to a Congress because the last thing they want is have both the presidency and both chambers of Congress in Democratic hands. And to a certain extent, they've got to keep that presidential number as close as they can to avoid that sort of row.
So let me ask you this. So you said something about political suicide. So it's kind of like you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. Stephen, let me ask you this, though. Don't you want to be, it almost kind of looks at it like the right side of history on this.
Right.
So if you're going to go down in flames, what side do you want to go down on?
Right. Think of the people in our history who have stood on the wrong side of history and how they are remembered now. Bull Connor standing in the schoolhouse door saying, no, we don't need segregation. We'll have, we don't need desegregation. We'll have segregation forever. I mean, Barry Goldwater going down the way he did in 1964. This is a test of the Republican Party. And if my fear is if they fail this test, it is such an important test of their character. And there are so many issues that divide the country so bitterly. I mean, I made the comparison in a column this week to the failure of the Whigs to deal with significant moral issues from a moral standpoint and a practical standpoint, which killed the party and led to the Republican Party in the first place.
Republicans aren't going to suddenly surge into the Democratic camp. I mean, they're fighting to save their party. I think it's a lost fight. I think this party is doomed after this election and is going to have to come back as something else.
What do you mean by that? And what does that look like if they have to come back as something else?
I think they're going to have to take this Trump contingent, this sort of rump group that controlled the primaries throughout, and they're going to have to find a way to separate themselves, or they can never lose because they're going to win because they're always going to be at war with themselves. And if you look,
or there's only 31% of them, or 30%.
I mean, they're a minority. They're a minority.
Yeah, but they were a minority all the way through the primaries, and they nominated the presidential candidate.
Think how far we've come with this party just in less than 2 decades. In 2000 and 2004, George Bush carried almost 40% of the Hispanic vote. He got more African American votes than Republicans had gotten in a long time. Nowhere close to a majority, but he was making inroads with these constituencies that have defied the Republican Party. And those are constituencies that are growing. There are more black voters in states like North Carolina, which we see is going to probably be blue. Georgia is close to that tipping point this time. Hispanics Latino voters are tipping states like New Mexico and Colorado and maybe Arizona. Without doing that, without going back to that direction that the party was headed, not that George W. Bush was the favorite of any of those people, but he was a more palatable candidate, particularly on moral issues like immigration, particularly on moral issues like race. He was not in this camp of either Donald Trump or the weak-kneed apologists who say, well, it's the party, and I got to support the party, so I can't stand up.
And I think it's interesting that you say that because, Nolan, we talked a lot about coming out of 2012, that the Republicans kind of wrote down this manifesto of what we need to do going forward to change our party a bit so we can gain more traction. And I feel like they threw that book out the window a long time ago.
And they lost control of the party. The Republican establishment is not controlling this election. They're sitting on the sidelines being dictated to. Several things interesting in our poll today, though. Only 68% of Republicans support Donald Trump or say they will vote for Donald Trump. No candidate can win with that little support amongst your own party. Only 40% of independents, only 1 in 4 women. I mean, this is the worst poll I've ever seen for a major party political candidate. And yet, one of the more intriguing things about this poll is, as Donald Trump's support has fallen off, he fell to 30% in this poll, which is
right,
rock
which is
bottom.
really interesting
But-
because Nolan and I were on CNN 2 weeks
Yeah.
ago talking about how Michigan, it was after your other poll came out,
Yeah.
talking about how, or the Free Press poll actually, how Michigan was in play here, and
It was then.
the change in numbers really is
It's been
staggering.
a disaster. But if you look at, as Donald Trump's number has eroded here, those voters have not gone to Clinton. Her number stayed exactly the same between the polling places. So I don't know where those voters are going, or where they will go on election
She
day.
got an 11-point lead here in Michigan now.
But her number
up
hasn't
from
changed.
5. She's got, well,
But that's totally Donald Trump's collapse, not her gain.
think you're
So
seeing-
where will those voters who are leaving Trump go?
Well, they're
they
going
won't
out
go
of
anywhere.
out of the sample. They're not going to vote. They're not going
that's
to
a
vote
shame.
for her.
And that's a
but I
shame.
think they won't show up.
And it's also weird that you still have like 11% undecideds too, because I'm saying, are you really
I know,
undecided?
and
Are you
so
really undecided, or do you
this
just
may-
don't want to tell a pollster you're
This may be an
decided?
extraordinarily low turnout election, and again, I think that's very bad for Republican congressional candidates. You could
Maybe.
see, we're 9-5 in this state now. I would predict that by November 9th, we're 7-7 or 8-6 even.
I want to ask really quick
What's
about.
the third district?
Well,
hang
you
on.
could lose the first. You
first
could
and the
lose the
seventh,
seventh,
two that-
and
You
you
think
could
Bishop
lose.
is
You
vulnerable?
could lose that
Well,
race.
speaking of Mike Bishop, who was running for re-election, and talking about the Michigan delegation in terms of, oh my gosh, do we endorse Trump or not endorse Trump? He has said, now I'm not going to talk about it. Don't ask me any questions. Do you think it's still fair game for the press to ask him
Well, you have
questions
to.
about everything that
Of
Donald
course.
Trump does?
Well, you have to. I mean, that doesn't mean you have to answer him, but that's pretty much the position Paul Ryan's taken, and that's sort of been the standard position. Just look, I'm not going to defend him anymore. And I think when a camera comes, when he does something or says something, and somebody puts a camera in front of you, just say, that's despicable. Like they did on Saturday. I don't think it hurt anybody to say on Saturday, we denounce his comments. And you
I
had
think they're going to
almost
have to
every
say that
one of
though
them.
every day. I mean, because if you think that this is the end of it, we've got a month to go for the
Yeah,
until the
and
election.
again, it's bigger than the election. If you don't stand up now, when are you going to stand up? When are you going to say something about all of these awful things, about the savagery he has unleashed on discrete populations in this country for months?
And that's why I think it's interesting that the tipping point, the point
was
was when he was caught on tape talking about women, when you could backtrack to egregious things that he has said in the past about other
Unbelievable.
people.
Black
Let's go
people,
back to the wall.
Muslims,
I'll tell you, after
Mexicans.
watching this, and we've been never Trump from the beginning,
Right.
But after watching this and then seeing the WikiLeaks come back out and the contempt the Clinton camp has for the American electorate, we feel very good about our Gary Johnson endorsement. Aleppo.
He is looking up Aleppo frantically right now as we speak. But I do
Couldn't even
name
I don't want to
Justin
leave this
Trudeau or-
conversation though
He's
without
at least
talking
he's
about.
honest.
I don't want to leave this
Honestly
conversation
stupid.
without talking about the WikiLeaks because I don't want to feel like that we're just all just going to pile on Trump every week as well, because you still have these emails coming out, and while people say, well, there's really maybe not that much in it, it goes to lend this thought of, is she hiding something? And that is the big thing that has surrounded Hillary Clinton's campaign, I think, from the beginning, or people's trust of her or lack of there.
Well, what you see in these, I mean, you shouldn't have to be hiding anything. What you see in these is bad enough. And some of the things that are coming out in these WikiLeaks, if she were running against anybody other than Donald Trump, this would be a big deal, and it would hurt her campaign. It's this elitist attitude that's conveyed by Clinton and her team, their disdain for large groups of Americans, Catholics, evangelicals, today Hispanics, they take a crack at. I mean, it's sort of this I'm better than you attitude, and I'm sort of above the law, that reflects this. And it's what we've known about the Clintons for years. It's why even a lot of Democrats had reservations about her candidacy until they saw Donald Trump. And it would be interesting, Republicans ought to be beating themselves to death thinking we could have drawn almost anybody out of that 16-person pool and we'd be riding high today, and we took Donald Trump.
And it's only because of Donald Trump. Do you think that these won't hurt her as much?
Oh no! I mean, in this election, they won't matter at all. They're not even getting any. They can't get any air time or space to get discussed because of his constant. I mean, it's almost like he's rushing in front of the camera to say something else offensive or not very
But
smart.
what we should be
Or he's
disturbed
tweeting
about,
in the middle of the
Tweeting
night.
in the middle of the night about,
Donald.
I mean, he's
No,
really
I mean,
lost control.
I mean, he's lonesome roads in a face in a crowd. I mean, he has just completely lost it. But what we also should be concerned about ourselves in this WikiLeaks is the cozy relationship between her campaign and many members of the press and many media outlets. It really speaks poorly of our business.
She does like Lafayette, Coney Island, though. They did talk about that. I
Or
think
one
they
of her-
did.
one of her
staffers did like that. All right. I guess, as we take a look at this going forward, gosh, we've got another debate next week. Kind of give me what your thoughts are going forward in this next week and what we can look for.
I mean, I think the best you can hope for, the best Republicans can hope for, is that it doesn't get any worse. It's not going to get any better. This next debate, October 19th, right?
Right.
It's a Fox News debate. She's going to get harder questions for a change than he does. But he's so unpredictable and he's so unhinged. I think he can even lose a Fox News debate. And
Well, it's not even that he's losing the debates, he's not participating in them. I mean, what he's doing is attempting to hijack the debates with all of this other stuff that is A, not being asked about either candidate, but B, is so far afield from what I think people even want to have them discuss.
well, he comes in unprepared.
Yeah, I mean,
and he
he's not-
comes in, and he doesn't seem to be listening. There are so many opportunities for him. She leaves him so many openings on the stage.
Because
and he
I
walks
think he's too
right
busy
beside them.
concentrating on one-liners and zingers.
Yeah.
I think that's.
I mean, he's not participating in the
No.
debate process so much as he's up there doing a one-man show that he thinks will appeal to voters.
So you think he's going to have his own news network when this is all over? If he does not win, I got to put that out
I think
there.
his brand is
No, I
probably
don't
more
think
damaged
there's-
than the Republican
I
brand.
I
after
think he's
this, right?
done. I don't think, there's a lot amongst conservatives, amongst Republicans, there's a lot of debate whether it'd be better if he just absolutely got crushed. And so you could say to those folks who hijacked the party,
See?
okay,
Yeah.
see, we told you so. Then if he, finishes a close race and you have to deal with these folks again, worst thing that can happen is that you make him into a martyr by trying to kick him off the ticket. Then he never goes away.
Yikes.
Can't get him off the ticket now anyway. The ballots are already
We
printed.
don't want that. All right, turning now to regional transit and the tax proposal we'll be voting on in a month. The RTA has put forward a $4.6 billion proposal. A lot of business and other organizations have put their support behind it, saying coordinated transit is a much needed next step in the growth of Southeast Michigan. But there is opposition to the plan, saying we're already paying a lot for transit and this plan may not be progressive enough. All right, so we are a month out. And Stephen, let me start with you. Have the pro RTA and this transit plan, had they done enough to educate the public in terms of what we are actually going to be paying for and that this is going to be a good, viable solution for regional
Well, I
transit?
mean, the information is out there. It is available. You can just go to their website and look at the plan and see how much of the gap, how many of the gaps that we have in Metro Detroit now with transit are going to be filled by this plan. The selling of it, I think, is always difficult. I mean, we always see these really, in this case, it's an institutional campaign. I mean, this is not just a fly-by-night effort, but not seeming to connect with individual people the way that you'd like them to, or
Have they started
individual
advertising?
voters. I don't know that there are ads out yet. I mean, I know that they're doing a lot of voter outreach, but I don't know that they're doing the mass campaign yet, and I don't know if that's going to. I don't know. Is
When
there
are they
money
If
for
it
that?
doesn't, I was going to say, if it hasn't started
Is there
now,
money for that? I don't know.
I don't
the
know,
answer
but
to
this
that.
is a hard sell. I mean, you could say the stuff's on the website and it's a compelling argument, but that's not how campaigns are run.
Well, sure.
One, voters aren't going to go to the website. You're asking for a really big tax hike, and if you're not out there pitching and selling it big time,
It's not a big tax hike.
It's 1.2 mils.
It's $120 on a house that's assessed at $100,000 a year. It's a very small tax increase.
It's not small for a lot of folks out there. It's a tax increase.
You have a house that's
to
worth
sell
that, you
a
can
tax
afford the
increase,
$120 a year.
You've got to spend money to sell a tax increase. They don't sell themselves, and
It's
I
$12
don't
a
see them
month.
doing it. I mean, we endorsed the thing last week, but we've
Both
got some
papers
real,
endorsed it,
both.
correct.
We got some concerns about the plan. One of our big concerns is that it doesn't seem to look ahead at this rapidly emerging mobility future and say, what could we have done with Uber and Lyft to maybe make this a cheaper, more efficient, more personal system? You know,
Well, it doesn't preclude any of
transportation
that.
is.
It doesn't preclude any of that. I mean, this is a plan that will unfold over the next 5, maybe 6 years, and it'll fill gaps that exist now. People can't get from their homes to work. They can't get from their homes to school. Uber and Lyft are not going to fill those gaps today. There's nothing that prevents the RTA from turning to those alternatives and thinking about them in the future.
But if you go out and ask voters, the voters who are going to have to pass this, suburban voters, and say, what's in this for you? I think
There's
a
a
lot of
lot.
them would have a hard time answering it. There should be. I mean, if the
But there
idea
is.
is to create a comprehensive bus system, people who normally drive their cars to work ought to be comfortable getting on
Sure.
a bus. And you've got to make that argument to them. You've got to sell them on it, because this is a place where almost 90% of the residents don't ride a bus in the course of a year. It's a big selling job, and I don't see them making much progress.
No, it's a
on
big
it.
selling job because it's more of a greater good selling job, and it's because you'll be paying for something that maybe you will not use as
No,
much as somebody else.
But
down
you
the
should
road
be
will.
able to use it. You should want to use this system like they do in other cities.
You'll be able
And that's
to.
how you have to sell it. If you sell it as sort of an altruistic thing, it's not going to pass.
not
But
altruistic.
if
It's
you
not
said,
It's
if
not
you said,
altruistic.
Chrissy, you're going to be able to ride downtown, you know, on your daily commute, you can leave that car at home, not pay for parking. That's the message they got to bring. They got to make it relevant to the people
And the truth
who are
is,
paying for
the
it.
plan that they put together, which of course is not just a plan they sat in a room and came up with, it's a plan they came up with after going to all of these places in the region and talking
And
to
they got
people.
buy-in from
They got
people who
buy-in from
came
a lot of
to
people.
public meetings
If
and
you look
gave
at
their
the,
suggestions.
if you look at the plan, I mean, the cross-county bus system that will be installed will allow people who live in Macomb and work in Oakland to ride a bus instead of driving across 696, which is a nightmare. The rapid bus lines that will come down Gratiot and Woodward, and I think Grand River, allow people in sort of the wings of the region to be able to do that. You'd be able to ride a rapid bus downtown for sporting events.
I agree with all that, but when are they going to sell it?
The criticisms of the plan are really weak because it is actually a really great plan, and it's getting us way further ahead than I thought we would get on the first try out of the box with the RTA. But I agree that we're not hearing enough of those arguments in the right places to convince voters.
And the major flaw of it remains that it's not a wholly consolidated
Well, and that's
system.
not the RTA's
And
fault.
It's not. But if you take a voter who's already just passed a smart increase last year, or somebody who's paying a high DDOT tax, and say you're going to pay another one, you've got to make a very compelling argument that
You gotta
this
show them
system's
there's
going
gonna
to
be better
work.
service. Yeah.
All right, one thing I want to get to before we have a chance to say goodbye, we were going to get to headlines today. We're going to scrap that. We had too much fun talking about the presidential race, but we're going to take a look
Because
now.
I didn't have
No
one.
headlines.
At
I had a
exactly.
headline.
You guys
Bob
didn't
Dylan-
bring in headlines,
Bob Dylan won the
please.
Nobel
Are you kidding
Prize
me?
for
You guys never
literature.
do what I ask.
I totally brought
I
mine.
have one.
Nolan came in, he goes, I don't have a headline today.
I had-
Shocker.
I-
Breaking news.
I got one. No, I forgot.
Yeah, I just forgot it. A likely story. All right, last thing we're going to talk about is taking a look at the community benefits question that will be on the ballot in Detroit. There are two proposals, Prop A, which was community-driven, and Prop B, similar but supported by Detroit City Council. And the proposals would make community benefits agreements law, and both look for protections and guarantees to go along with major development projects in the city. And supporters say it's needed, especially after news this week that developers working on the new Red Wings arena have not hired the agreed-upon Detroit workers for the project. You know, and the City Council was looking at an ordinance back a couple years ago on this, and now this is a possibility. And Nolan, I'm going to let you take a first crack at this in terms of they can vote for both, they can vote for one, they can vote for not the other. Is there
Talk about confusing. I have no way to predict that. I just know that what we saw this week with the fines against the arena, the district project, you know, it's fine to build in these mandates into these agreements, but then the city and the schools have a obligation to provide and train workers. The workforce is not available to meet the demands of these agreements. And in some cases, you might as well be saying you need to hire 10% Martians because the workers don't exist. And that's something we've got to address. We've got 7 vocational schools in DPS. 6 of them are sitting empty as this school year starts. There are jobs available if we just train people to do them. And I mean, to me, it's unconscionable that we're not training people.
Well,
Is this
So-
smart? Is this smart protection, or is this deter development projects?
You have to have these agreements to make the benefits of these development projects reach the people who live in the city. It's interesting that you say that the city and the schools should be training these workers. The developers in this case have got $500 million worth of tax money, and that's the reason to spend that money. They should be spending
And
that
they
money.
are. I
Some
mean,
of them are.
The unions.
Hold on, let me finish though.
Are running.
Hold on.
Let me finish.
Let him finish. We've got 35
That
seconds.
$500 million that went to build this arena should be paying to train workers to be able to do these jobs. Some of it is, most of it is not. If you were spending $500 million on that, you wouldn't be paying these fines. So you need these agreements to not count on the benevolence of billionaires who are getting tax subsidies to do their own development projects to help the community. We need to make sure that they do it and that they do it the right way. The success here is that they've done the right thing with Detroit contractors. We have those numbers. We met those numbers. The next thing is workers.
All right, we're going to have to take a longer look at that on our next show. All right, thanks guys. That's going to do it for My Week. Make sure you catch up with us, myweek.org. We're also on Twitter and on Facebook. I'm Christy McDonald. For all of us at Detroit Public TV, we will see you next time. Take care.
Did you know Roush Enterprises was selected by Google to assemble a test fleet of 100 prototype self-driving cars in 2015? It also produced the new Domino's delivery cars. And speaking of Domino's, Domino's sells well over 2 million pizzas per day around the world, and half of their sales are digital. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Funding is also provided by Delta.